Yeah, let's talk about bird names. Anyway, I'm like losing my mind here. I'm losing my mind here, I really am. Because I don't understand what the real priorities are.
Let's watch this real quick. Just a couple minutes from this recent TYT video about the NPR whistleblower. Have you been following the NPR whistleblower, Zach?
I mean, I know that this is the kind of story that like Matt Taibbi would like, nut in his pants about. But that's about the extent of it.
Yeah, you couldn't have said it better, honestly. Yeah, this guy wrote an article. He did work at NPR. He apparently worked there for like 25 years, but he decided to pin an expose of sorts, a critique. And where did he go to do that? To Barry Weiss's The Free Press. So this is where he decided to air his grievances with NPR, which is pretty funny. And apparently he's a huge Israel simp too. There's one pretty crazy part of this article where he says, more talking about the staff at NPR, he says, more recently, we have approached the Israel-Hamas war and its spillover onto the streets and campuses through the intersectional lens that has jumped from the faculty lounge to newsrooms, oppressors versus oppressed. Yeah, that's kind of important when you're talking about Israel-Palestine, you idiot. That means highlighting the suffering of Palestinians at almost every turn. That's because the suffering of Palestinians is happening at every turn. To not highlight it would just be dishonest. Like, that's literally what Israel's doing. They're creating suffering at every turn for Palestinian people while downplaying the atrocities of October 7th. Zach, I know you read NPR. Have you heard them downplay the atrocities of October 7th ever?
No, and quite the opposite. They've actually had a similar policy to the one that we know was the explicit policy of the New York Times. Jeremy Scahill and Ryan Grimm published the other day that leaked NYT Gaza memo tells journalists to avoid words like genocide, ethnic cleansing, and occupied territory amid the internal battle over the New York Times coverage of Israel's war. Top editors handed down a set of directives. So this is actually what it's like in the leading news rooms of our time, the liberal magazines. This is the kind of guy that he's basically pissed off that he has to work around some people that probably use terms like non-binary, who have probably said things like, yeah, I stand with Palestine, free Palestine. And he probably, if you ask him to make a short list of the biggest problems in society, almost certainly one or two is going to be something to do with wokeness or something to do with young people. And if you think I'm going to, for 1 second, be like, look at what this guy has to say about the state of the media, when he turns around and does a 180 and he says it's not sympathetic enough to Israel and it's too woke, too many young people are in charge of the media landscape. I'm sorry, but I want to laugh in your face and then fucking spit on you. That's how I feel.
Exactly. Yeah, that was my takeaway too. And I mean, it's not even like I'm the biggest NPR simp in the world. I remember how NPR treated Bernie Sanders when he was running. I remember, tuning into NPR to hear them disrespecting him and acting like, obviously Hillary's going to win when they had no place to be editorializing in that sort of a way. So I'm not even a huge simp of NPR. I think that, there certainly could be a version of this expose that would be worth reading and that would expose a lot of the sort of, liberal groupthink that surely does infect that newsroom as well as many others. Not that NPR doesn't also do really good work. Of course they do. But yeah, it's an interesting thing. I feel like him publishing over at Barry Weiss's The Free Press and revealing his sympathies for Israel kind of compromises any legitimacy that his argument might otherwise have. But either way, Anna doesn't really seem to have much of an issue at all with just uncritically reporting on this guy's expose and seemingly giving a lot of credibility to his arguments in the process. So I wanted to take a look here. There's some pretty funny nuggets in the, just 2 or 3 minutes I wanted to react to. But yeah, take a look at this, guys.
There was more. During a meeting with colleagues, I listened as one of NPR's best and most fair-minded journalists said it was good we weren't following the Hunter Biden laptop story because it could help Trump. So look, journalism has basically changed significantly over the last several years. So some people might not know this, but a journalist, like an actual journalist who's not engaging in political activism, is not supposed to engage in political activism, number one, and is supposed to simply give readers or viewers, whatever the outlet is, information about the world around them as it is, right?
Anna is a fucking child. I'm sorry, I had to run back. I'm shaking off my piss as I'm like listening to this through my headphones, and I'm like shaking and shaking and shaking because I have to jump in here and cut this horseshit. She's a child, okay? Do you think, guys? Imagine being a full-grown adult. How old's Anna? Like fucking just a hair shy of 40? I don't know. 35? I don't know. And you've made it through all this time, and you still think that the world is a fairy tale, that the world is a picture book, and you have no sense of anything opaque. You have no understanding of the word nuance. You don't understand that everybody is a unique individual with their own perception, what they are going to choose to write about. It is an impossibility, right? Shout out to the patron saint of the Vanguard, the doctor of journalism, Raoul Duke, Hunter Thompson, who wrote famously that there was no such thing as objective journalism, that its whole point was a contradiction of terms, and not to look forward under any byline of his or anybody else that he could think of. Why? Because with the exception of stock indexes and box scores, there's no fucking such thing. Every single person on earth has their own perspective, their own POV. So when you're like, oh, I want my journalist to be this amorphous blob of tofu that's not a political activist, that doesn't have any political thoughts or feelings, that doesn't cast a ballot in November, that doesn't spend their whole time developing opinions on things. It's like, why? You want people to lie to you? Because what you can either have is people who lie and pretend and give you a corporate lie, which I'll tell you fucking happens all the time to people who work in what's called legacy media, right? Something that Anna constantly bemoans and lampoons as being outdated. That's what she's looking for. She's looking for them to force you into this narrow fucking line where it's like, oh, the media used to just be about telling the truth, man. It used to just be about showing up and being like, that house is on fire. And now they're all like, why did the landlord like fucking not make sure that this was properly regulated? It's like, what the fuck? Just tell people that the house was on fire, you dummy. We don't want to know about the landlord and how the family died because of criminal negligence. Like, what? That's just diving into the backstory. Why is this always about oppressor and oppressed? Like, what are you talking about? Like, do you know how dumb you sound when you say that? It's completely ridiculous to be like, I just want to bring back objective journalism, as you sit on a show called the Young Turks Network, where you call yourself the home of progressive media. And also, if you're going to bemoan the coverage of the Hunter Biden laptop story, you have to at least come out and fess to the fact that you shoved down the throat of your fucking unwilling audience for 4.5 fucking years the Russiagate story and never came clean about it. And Cenk Uygur was constantly challenged about it, and he was constantly humiliated about it, and he was constantly claiming there was going to be a smoking gun that never came. Cenk Uygur said it was for sure that Donald Trump was going to go to jail before he left office. And then what did he do? He led an insurrection at the end of a fucking term because he was never in jail, and there was no nuts and bolts to the fucking Russiagate hoax story. Why would he have sent why would he have sent anti-tank ballistic missiles to Ukraine and escalated massively with Russia just to prove a point, to say that he wasn't a bitch to anybody, if he was a puppet for Putin, as Cenk legitimately claimed? Like, Cenk fell hook, line, and sinker for the Steele dossier, for all of it. It was constantly debunked. And now they're out here like crusading for Matt Taibbi, who's done the old switcheroo. He got one thing really right so he could get the next thing really wrong.
Yeah, 100%. And it's funny because that's actually one of the only good points that this Yuri Berliner guy makes in the Free Press article about NPR is actually their willingness to gobble up the Russiagate bullshit uncritically. It's actually one of the best points he makes, and one of the truly legitimate criticisms of NPR and pretty much all of the liberal outlets was the way they just completely uncritically gobbled up that Russiagate bullshit and fed it to their audience for money, for clicks, attention, whatever, telling people exactly what they wanted to hear. All these liberals that were terrified of Trump, oh, don't worry, he's going to get taken care of. He's going to get taken care of by Mueller. You know, the Russia stuff's going to take him down. Just keep tuning in night after night after night to my show, and I'll tell you about how exactly that's going to happen. And as you said, Zach, TYT did exactly the same thing. They've never apologized for it. They've never corrected the record and, you know, admitted to falling into the exact same, you know, sort of dishonest misinformation spreading that MSNBC engaged in, and, you know, the New York Times and NPR. But now in retrospect, Anna gets to sit here and act virtuous and pretend that, you know, somehow she actually is one of the only people left in the modern media landscape who really still values objective journalism. And of course, I also thought this was funny because I've been watching TYT for a long ass time, guys, and I do remember back in, I believe, around 2016, Anna was featured in Forbes, what is it, 40 under 40 or whatever the hell it's called. This was the headline at the time.
30, I think.
30 under 30. Yeah. A lot of people were really upset about this at the time. I remember a lot of people made, you know, videos critiquing Anna and TYT for this position, but she straight up said she won't pretend to be neutral. I can't pretend I'm some robot that's always neutral, says Ana Kasparian. I need to share my opinion, and sometimes aggressively so. And that's not only while she was a host and producer of The Young Turks, but also a professor of journalism. So, you know, I mean, clearly she felt like she had a pretty decent grasp on reporting and journalism, so much so that she considered herself a journalist and literally you know, was a professor of the subject matter. And here she is straight up saying, of course I'm not going to pretend I'm neutral. I'm not some robot. I have to share my opinion, sometimes aggressively so. That's part of my job. Now, what, 5, 6, 7 years later, I can't believe everyone has forgotten what journalism really means, what objectivity and reporting is all about.
Man, God bless you and your anthologic knowledge of BreadTube. That I had no idea that existed. This is the exact same, like, just 180 that she's taken on a bunch of issues that she claims are like her red lines. Because we also played the clip of her back in the day dunking on people who make a big deal out of using inclusive language, and now all she does is mauled about it. We've played videos of her in the past talking about how, hey, homeless people aren't your fucking enemies. It's actually the rich people who are making housing expensive. Those are your enemies. She's done those stories too. But now it's like, oh, you want to do this like a weird about face for Republicans where you know, oh, I'm the rational lefty. I know Los Angeles is falling apart. Ben Shapiro is right. You know, he grew up in Los Angeles when it was all rich white people, and now it's crazy. Now people are going into neighborhoods they're not supposed to. Yeah, that sounds woke. Like, what the fuck is going? It's crazy. It's crazy. The LA thing is so nuts because it's like you go to LA. Yeah, there's poverty. Yeah, there's poor people. But I can't tell you a single time I ever felt unsafe. I hung out on Venice Beach. I hung out in downtown LA. I went and hung out in West Hollywood. I went and hung out all around. I drove all the way up to Santa Barbara, hung out for a few days, drove all the way back down. I've been to Long Beach in the past. We fucking hung out with, or I guess, Gavin, you weren't on that trip, but met my homie Ron Placone in San Pedro. Been all over the fucking city of Los Angeles, and I've never once seen anything like sideways. And they'll be like, you're not hanging out in the worst housing project in Los Angeles. Well, that's where you'll see some bullshit. I'm like, yeah, well, unfortunately,
as if Ana Kasparian is either.
I know, that's what I'm saying. I'm like, okay, yeah, dude. Well, I never kicked it in the worst housing projects in Kansas City, but guess what? That's a poverty deal. That's not a California deal.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So let's take a bit more of this in. There's a pretty funny part where Anna gets really triggered by some NPR article that I guess was written about how bird names are racist or something. So you guys are going to have to see this to believe it.
No, we shouldn't cover this story because it could help Trump. That's activism. That's totally activism, right? And that goes against what traditional journalism is supposed to do. And he took issue with that as well. He also pointed a finger at the former NPR CEO, John Lansing, who took the position in 2019, only 1 year before the murder of George Floyd. And then Berliner claims that NPR leadership gave the following guidance in the aftermath of George Floyd's murder. Race and identity became paramount in nearly every aspect of the workplace. Journalists were required to ask everyone we interviewed their race, gender, and ethnicity, among other questions, and had to enter it in a centralized tracking system. This isn't creepy at all. This is totally fine. We were given unconscious bias training sessions. Growing DEI staff offered regular meetings imploring us to start talking about race. Here, let me make a suggestion here. A workplace that is obsessed with race and is encouraged to constantly talk about race, not gonna be a great work environment to be.
Oh my God, that's humiliating. This white lady is out here hanging out, telling everybody, hey, listen, you know what's really bad? When your workplace is trying to be racially conscious. Gavin, I don't know if you've heard about this, but the real worst shit in the world is when your office starts doing like diversity training. You know, honestly, like Ana Kasparian's never found Michael Scott more relatable. It's just like, oh my God, I can't do the comedy that I want to at my work anymore. They always want us thinking about race, talking about race. That's racist. Okay. You know, I just like to look around at work, and if I only see white people, well, hey, that doesn't bother me, right? Yeah, hey, okay. You know, oh wow, let's look at the demographics in media. Let's look at the fucking net income of the people who are making money in media. Oh, it is mammothly skewed towards white people by a lot? What? That's crazy. Well, we don't really, if you talk about that, dude, just bring race into everything. You just want to bring race into everything.
Why'd you gotta make it political?
Yeah, dude, you know, it's like, oh, hey, man, yeah, just tell everybody you don't want to give up your piece of the pie. Just be like, no, I'm happy eating while y'all go hungry.
Yep. Classic fear mongering over shit that's really not even that new to the workplace. Like you just referenced, Zach, if you go back to the classic Office episode Diversity Day from like 2003, you can find the same conversation unfolding. But anyway, this is about to get really good.
And that was another thing that he pointed to. So here's what this all looked like in practice. He writes stories on how the Beatles and bird names are racially problematic. I came across that story, by the way, about bird names being problematic, and didn't want to cover it on the show because I thought it was stupid, but I'll continue. I'm gonna say it again, it was stupid. It was a stupid story. It was a stupid story. If you're offended by that, that's totally fine. You can be offended by that. No constitutional protections from being offended. But if you think a story about needing to rename birds because bird names are racist is super important as our country burns, as our government funds the slaughter of children in another country, I don't know what to say. It's a stupid story. It's stupid. It's not important. It's just not. There's a lot more stuff happening, not only in our country, but around the world that's way more important, that has a bigger impact on people of color. Okay, but
she's a great judge of that, by the way.
Yeah, that's the funny thing is like TYT covers some of the dumbest shit ever. They always have. Like their whole fucking channel is full of just like stupid stories. And some of them are fun. Like I don't care about that stuff. Like, I mean, it's part of their show. But it's not like they only cover the most important, hyper sensitive issues ever. Like, no, they also kind of dabble in weird like novelty stories or funny things, social justice issues, especially back in the day. I remember they did like a freaking 15-minute long video once about how Harambe memes are racist and shit like that. Like she's literally criticizing NPR for publishing the kind of content that TYT has historically trafficked in. And I mean, I guess you could say they don't do it as much now, but I mean, they still do. It's just not from the exact same angle. Now they're just complaining about wokeness instead of pushing it. Yeah, there you go.
This guy really quickly. This is recommended to me. Christian men's conference erupts over a sword swallower. That's real hard-hitting journalism. Did you know that while children are on fire in other countries because of our government, the Young Turks are out here doing shows, doing real valuable news segments in front of an audience of millions of people. Do you know how many subscribers they have over at the Young Turks? Do you know how many minds they're capable of reaching? What are they doing? They're out here talking about sword swallowing in this economy. And there's a lot more that they could be doing for the Armenian community.
All right, let's just listen to like one more minute of this. You hear about the birds and how racist the birds and the Beatles are or whatever.
But yeah, let's talk about bird names. Anyway, I'm like losing my mind here. I'm losing my mind here. I really am. Because I don't understand what the real priorities are. Let me start that.
She literally sounds like a TYT critic from like 2016, like reacting to their content. Like, why are they focusing on Harambe memes and how racist they are? The world is burning right now.
Did you
the climate
see Britney Spears' camel toe?